Hi students, our topic today is the heart and circulatory system, by Dr. Samhani Ismail. For learning outcome, we will learn about first, describe the functional structures of the heart, second, describe the components of vascular tree, their role and their key differences, third, explain the differences between the pulmonary and systemic circulation. Functional structure of the heart, cardiovascular system, CVS, or the circulatory system transports essential nutrients, oxygen, hormones, etc., to the tissues and removes the products of metabolism from the tissue and also contributes to the regulation of many homeostatic functions like fluid balance, temperature regulation of the body. Components of the cardiovascular system. Cardiovascular system consists of two components, heart and vascular tree. Cardiovascular system consists of a central pump, the heart that propels blood into circulation, and an extensive network of blood vessels that circulates blood throughout the body. The primary function of the heart is to pump blood into circulation. Hence, the forceful ejection of blood creates energy for the blood to circulate in the blood vessels. White blood cells is to protect the body against disease and infection. Clotting stops bleeding after injury. Clotting mechanisms are also present that protect the body from blood loss after injuries. Functions of the cardiovascular system. Cardiovascular system circulates oxygen and removes carbon dioxide. It also provides cells with nutrients. Besides, it removes the waste products of metabolism to the excretory organs for disposal. Cardiovascular system also protects the body against disease and infection, stops bleeding after injury, transports hormones to target cells and organs, and helps regulate body temperature. Function of the heart. The primary function of the heart is to pump blood into circulation. The forceful ejection of blood creates energy for the blood to circulate in the blood vessels. Heart consists of dual pump, the right and left pumps that ejects blood into two serial circuits, the pulmonary and systemic circulation. This figure shows that the right heart pushes blood into pulmonary circuit while the left heart pushes into the systemic circuit. The right pump is the right ventricle that propels blood into the pulmonary circulation for exchange of gases in the lungs, blue-colored. The left pump propels blood into the systemic circulation to supply oxygen and nutrients to the tissues, red-colored. The output of each pump at rest is about 5 lit per min. This accounts for about 400 million liters of blood pumped by the heart during the lifetime of a person who lives about 70 years, which is enough to fill a lake of 1 kilometer long, 40 meter wide and 10 meter deep. In addition to this resting output, pumping of blood is increased many-fold in daily routine works, exercise, emotion, etc. The heart has 4 chambers, 2 atria and 2 ventricles. The right atrium and right ventricle constitute right side of the heart, sometimes called as right heart, especially by clinicians, and the left atrium and left ventricle constitute the left side of the heart, or the left heart. At the right side of the heart, the right atrium receives blood from body regions superior to the diaphragm through superior vena cava, and from body regions below the diaphragm through inferior vena cava, and empties blood into the right ventricle. The right atrioventricular valve or the tricuspid valve guards the flow of blood from right atrium to right ventricle and prevents flow of blood in backward direction. The right ventricle contracts and pumps blood into the pulmonary circulation through the pulmonary trunk, the pulmonary arteries, where gaseous exchange takes place. Pulmonary valve prevents backflow of blood from pulmonary trunk into the right ventricle. The right heart is also called as pulmonary circuit. Blood returning from the body is relatively oxygen-poor, carbon dioxide rich. It enters the right atrium and passes into the right ventricle, which pumps it to the lungs via pulmonary trunk. In the lungs, the blood unloads CO2 and picks up O2. The freshly oxygenated blood is carried by the pulmonary veins back to the left side of the heart. Left side of the heart, the left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the pulmonary circulation via pulmonary veins and empties blood into left ventricle through left atrioventricular valve or mitral valve. The mitral valve ensures unidirectional flow of blood from the left atrium to the left ventricle. Left ventricle pumps blood into the systemic circulation through the aorta. The aortic or the semilunar valve, which is present at the base of aorta, prevents backflow of blood into left ventricle from the aorta. The left heart is also called a systemic circuit. Freshly oxygenated blood leaving the lungs is returned to the left atrium and passes into the left ventricle, which pumps it into the aorta. From aorta, the blood is transported via smaller systemic arteries to the body tissues where gases and nutrients are exchanged across the capillary walls. Then the blood, once again loaded with CO2 and depleted O2, returned through the systemic veins to the right side of the heart where it enters the right atrium through the superior and inferior vena cava. There are some differences between the right and left ventricle. The pulmonary circuit, right ventricle, is a short, low-pressure circulation, whereas the systemic circuit, left ventricle, takes a long pathway through the entire body and encounters 5 times of friction, or resistance, to blood flow. Hence, the left ventricle walls are 3 times thicker as of the right ventricle. Consequently, the left ventricle can generate much more pressure and is far more powerful pump. Blood flows through the heart in one direction. And this one-way traffic is enforced by 4 valves, called as pulmonary valve and tricuspid valve in the right heart, and aortic valve and mitral valve in the left heart. Atrioventricular valve (AV) valves. There are 2 AV valves which are located between atrium-ventricular junction to prevent backflow to the atrium when the ventricle contracting. They are the tricuspid valve, which is located at the right AV valve, and the mitral valve, which is located at the left AV valve. Semilunar valve (SL) valves are the aortic and pulmonary valves. These semilunar valves prevent backflow into the associated ventricles, and each semilunar valve is fashioned from 3 pocket-like cusps. Semilunar valve open and close in response to differences in pressure. In the semilunar case, when the ventricles are contracting and interventricular pressure rises above the pressure in the aorta and pulmonary trunk, the semilunar valves are forced open. When the ventricles relax, and the blood flows backward toward the heart, it fills the cusps and closes the valves. Stenosis. In valvular stenosis, narrowing, the valve flaps become stiff and constrict the opening. This stiffness compels the heart to contract more forcibly than normal. In both instances, the heart's workload increases and, ultimately, the heart may be severely weakened. Cardiac muscle structure. The ability of cardiac muscle to depolarize and contract is intrinsic, where it is not depending on the nervous system. Electrical stimulation in the form of a cardiac action potential triggers the release of calcium from the cell's internal calcium store, the sarcoplasmic reticulum. The rise in calcium causes the cell's myofilaments to slide past each other in a process called excitation-contraction coupling. The heart beat rhythmically due to the electrical stimulation that triggers calcium release and caused cardiac contraction. The heart conducting system is the network of nodes, specialized cells, and electrical signals that keep the heart beating. There are 2 types of cells control the heartbeat: conducting cells that carry the electrical signals, and muscle cells that control the heart's contractions. The heart conducting system sends the signal to start a heartbeat. It also sends signals that tell different parts of the heart to relax and contract, squeeze. This process of contracting and relaxing controls blood flow through your heart and to the rest of the body. The heart is a pump that sends blood through your body. For each heartbeat, electrical signals travel through the conduction pathway of the heart. It starts when the sinoatrial (SA) node creates an excitation signal. The excitation signal travels to sinoatrial node, SA node wall of the right atrium near the opening of the superior vena cava, telling them to contract. The atrioventricular node, AV node, between the left atrium and the right ventricle within the atrial septum, delaying the signal until the atria are empty of blood, bundle of His, along the interventricular septum, which carrying the signal to the Purkinje fibers, in the inner ventricular walls of the heart, just beneath the endocardium, causing them to contract. These steps make up one full contraction of the heart muscle. The heart conduction system sends out thousands of signals per day to keep the heart beating. Sequence of excitation. First, sinoatrial node, SA node. SA node is a specialized myocardial structure that initiates the electrical impulses to stimulate contraction. SA node is found in the atrial wall at the junction of superior caval vein and the right atrium. It generates impulses about 75 times per minute. Its contraction is rhythmic, called a sinus rhythm, which determines the heart rate. Second, atrioventricular node. From the SA node, the depolarization wave spreads to the atrioventricular AV node activated and conducts the electrical impulse from the atria to the ventricles. At the AV node, the impulse is delayed, allowing the atria to fully eject their blood into the ventricle first before the ventricle contracts. Once through the AV node, the signaling impulse passes rapidly through the rest of the system. Third, the bundle of His. From the AV node, the impulse sweeps to the atrioventricular AV bundle in the superior part of the interventricular septum.
The bundle of His is a part of the electrical system of the heart. It is a collection of cells that carry electrical signals from the AV node to the bundle branches. The electrical system that controls the heartbeat is made up of several parts that signal the heart muscle to contract. The SA node initiates the sequence, causing the atria or upper chambers of the heart to contract. The electrical current then travels through the AV node, bundle of His, bundle branches, and Purkinje fibers. This causes the ventricles, the lower chambers of the heart, to contract. The normal sequential flow of electrical signals produces a normal heartbeat.
Fourth, right and left bundle branches. The AV bundle persists only briefly before splitting into two pathways, the right and left bundle branches, which course along the interventricular septum toward the heart apex. Fifth, Purkinje fibers. Purkinje fibers complete the pathway through the interventricular septum, penetrate into the heart apex, and then turn superiorly into the ventricular walls. The vascular system, also called the circulatory system, is made up of the vessels that carry blood and lymph through the body. The arteries and veins carry blood throughout the body, delivering oxygen and nutrients to the body tissues and taking away tissue waste matter. The vascular system consists of the arterial system, the capillaries, and the venous system. Vascular are the channels through which blood is distributed to body tissues. Begin and end at the heart. Arterial system, arteries carry blood away from the heart. Pulmonary arteries transport blood that has a low oxygen content from the right ventricle to the lungs. Systemic arteries transport oxygenated blood from the left ventricle to the body tissues. Blood is pumped from the ventricles into large elastic arteries that branch repeatedly into smaller and smaller arteries until the branching results in microscopic arteries called arterioles. Arterioles regulate the resistance to flow through the various organs of the body. Thus, they control distribution and rate of blood flow to the organs. Arteries have a thick tunica media. The smooth muscles of arteries are extensively innervated by sympathetic fibers of the autonomic nervous system. Therefore, sympathetic stimulation results in vasoconstriction and sympathetic inhibition leads to vasodilation, allowing to pass the blood. The capillaries is the smallest and most numerous blood vessels, form connections between the vessels that carry blood away from the heart and the vessels that return blood to the heart. The primary function of capillaries is to exchange the materials between the blood and tissue cells. The venous system refers to the network of veins and the way the veins connect with other blood vessels and organs throughout body. The venous system is organized into two main parts or circuits. These are the systemic circuit and the pulmonary circuit. Veins carry blood towards the heart. After blood passes through the capillaries, it enters the smallest veins, called venules. From the venules, it flows into progressively larger and larger veins until it reaches the heart. Pulmonary vein transport blood from the lungs to the left atrium of the heart. This blood has a high oxygen content because it has just been oxygenated in the lungs. While systemic veins transport blood from the body tissue to the right atrium of the heart. This blood has a reduced oxygen content because the oxygen has been used for metabolic activities in the tissue cells. The circulatory system. The circulatory system consists of the heart and the arteries and veins that convey blood throughout the body. Blood must always circulate to sustain life. It carries oxygen from the air we breathe to cells throughout the body. The pumping of the heart drives this blood flow through the arteries, capillaries, and veins. One set of blood vessels circulates blood through the lungs for gas exchange. The other vessels fuel the rest of the body. There are two types of circulation: pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. Systemic circulation. In the systemic loop, oxygenated blood is pumped from the left ventricle of the heart through the aorta, the largest artery in the body. The blood moves from the aorta through the systemic arteries, then to arterioles and capillary beds that supply body tissues. Here, oxygen and nutrients are released and carbon dioxide and other waste substances are absorbed. Deoxygenated blood then moves from the capillary beds through venules into the systemic veins. The systemic veins feed into the inferior and superior venae cavae, the largest veins in the body. The venae cavae flow deoxygenated blood to the right atrium of the heart. Systemic circulation, major circulation, containing 80 to 85% of total blood volume. It provides oxygenated blood to different body parts, drains venous blood back to the heart. The left ventricle pumps blood. The pressure is high. The systolic pressure is 100 to 140 millimeters of mercury. The pressure drops as the blood flows from arteries to the vein, have high resting vasoconstrictor tone, high resistance. The capillaries are longer, narrower.
During the systemic loop, blood moves through arteries and flows into capillary beds. Here, oxygen is released and diffuses through the capillary wall into tissues. Meanwhile, carbon dioxide diffuses into the bloodstream.
Pulmonary circulation. In the pulmonary loop, deoxygenated blood exits the right ventricle of the heart and passes through the pulmonary trunk. The pulmonary trunk splits into the right and left pulmonary arteries. These arteries transport the deoxygenated blood to arterioles and capillary beds in the lungs. There, carbon dioxide is released and oxygen is absorbed. Oxygenated blood then passes from the capillary beds through venules into the pulmonary veins. The pulmonary veins transport it to the left atrium of the heart. The pulmonary arteries are the only arteries that carry deoxygenated blood, and the pulmonary veins are the only veins that carry oxygenated blood. Pulmonary circulation. Minor circulation, containing 10 to 12% of total blood volume. It provides a low-resistance pathway for the entire output of the right ventricle to traverse through the lungs. The primary function of pulmonary circulation is to exchange gases between blood and the atmosphere. Hence, the arteries have thin wall and large lumen, rich sympathetic innervation but lack resting vasoconstrictor tone. Resistance is less. Arterioles have thin wall and large lumen, capillaries are shorter and wider. Here are the systemic circulation and the pulmonary circulation. Differences between pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. First, pulmonary circulation carries deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle of the heart to the lungs through the pulmonary artery, while systemic circulation carries oxygenated blood from the left ventricle of the heart to the rest of the body by the aorta. Second, Pulmonary circulation carries blood to the lungs while systemic circulation carries blood throughout the body. Third, pulmonary circulation has low pressure, while systemic circulation has high pressure. Fourth, the arteries and arterioles of the pulmonary circulation have thin wall and large lumen, while the arteries of the systemic circulation has thick wall, narrow lumen. Fifth, the capillaries of pulmonary circulation are short and wide, while the capillaries of systemic circulation long and narrow. Thank you very much for your attention.